Welcome to the Stolen Goodbyes podcast with me, Karen Rice. This podcast is being recorded remotely due to the COVID-19 restrictions. Today I'm joined by Michelle Rumble, who lost her mother, Violet, to COVID-19 on April the 9th this year. She was 78 years old. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me. I would just like to start by asking you what Violet was like as a person and also as a mother.
Just a loving, selfless, generous. She was all for everybody else and not herself. She'd put everybody else first before herself, especially her children. And then obviously when her grandchildren come along and her great-grandchildren, she was just, made up, She's just a loving, caring person. That you couldn't say anything bad about my mum. Nobody would ever say anything bad about my mum. She had nothing bad to say about anybody. She was just a lovely person.
And what do you miss about her most on a daily basis?
Well, I used to see her every Saturday. Before this come about, she'd come to me every Saturday. She'd be with me every Saturday all through the day. We'd have our little chats and we'd plan our little day trips down to the seaside. Because we used to just just get off and go in a train. Me and my sisters and my mum would just go off to just to any seaside just for the day. We'd go to, we've been to quite a few, backwards and forwards and that. And yeah, she's just...
What were some of your best trips with your mum?
Oh, well, I think her best trip, if I'm perfectly honest, was her cruise around the Caribbean with my sister. She absolutely loved that. Absolutely loved that. She did. She loved holidays. Even from when she was a child. But now we've looked back on all her pictures from when she was little. She was always at the seaside. She's always got sand under her feet. Literally, in every picture that we see of her, she was always at the seaside. She loved any seaside. It didn't matter which one she went to, but she loved all of it. She'd just sit there, watch the waves, watch the sea, have her fish and chips by the seaside. It was just... That's what she just loved doing. Anywhere, she'd go to any of them.
Your favourite trip with her?
Oh, well, I took her to Ventura many years ago as well, She loved that. We stayed in a villa. We had our own pool and everything. She'd be up before everybody else, dipping her toes in the pool and having a little splash in the pool before anybody else woke up, She did. She just loved her holidays, Obviously, when she retired, we were hoping to take her on more holidays.
Tell me a little bit about her life, what she worked at, your father.
Well, she was growing up. She'd done many jobs, obviously, before she had us, and then she became, obviously, a mum. And obviously, with 4 girls, obviously, she was literally a housewife for quite a few years. And then she worked as an NHS cleaner. She worked at our local hospital and cleaned there for many years, cleaning the nurses' quarters, the children's ward, And at one point she actually lived on the hospital because she was also allocated rooms to the families that come in with children that were been in accidents or severely burnt. So she would literally be on call and access the rooms for them so they could literally have somewhere to sleep overnight while they were wanting to stay near their children.
Was that important to her?
Oh, yeah, she loved her job.
What did she like about it?
I think, obviously, the people, communicating.
How did your mum make your life better?
My life wouldn't be my life isn't the same without my mum. It's just quite hard. Yeah, she was just a very, very special lady. She loved everybody. And there's just a massive hole now.
It's very hard.
Which it makes it so much worse because she wasn't, even though she worked in a hospital, which is quite ironic, but she had a fear of dying. And that was her ultimate fear, was dying. And she never actually liked staying in hospitals. And she didn't have to. She was a very, very well woman and she didn't like staying in hospitals. And she'd only stayed in hospital last year when she had her hip replaced, and she was in and out in a couple of days. And yeah, even though she worked in hospital, she didn't like staying in them. And yeah, her ultimate fear was dying. And
What would she say about that?
she didn't want to die. She didn't want to die. When this come about, when this actually come in and it was all over the news and everything else, she went, oh, I don't want that. I don't want that. You know, I don't want that. And then what happens? She gets taken into hospital on the Wednesday, and that was the last time we saw her.
So can you describe for me, you know, how she fell ill? What happened?
It's just crazy. I don't know how it. It's like one day she was fine. She got a bit sleepy one day. No symptoms. When I say no, I mean no symptoms. No cough, no temperature. And then I phoned her. She wasn't great the day before. And I'd say 2 days before, she wasn't fantastic. My niece that lived there with her phoned 111, and they just said, just self-isolate. They spoke to my mum. They told her to self-isolate. And then my niece phoned again on the Tuesday, because I said to my mum, you don't look great, mum. And she said, no, I'm fine. And 111 got on the phone, and they said again, self-isolate, you know, just stay at home, self-isolate. When I phoned my mum on the Wednesday morning, she couldn't breathe. Literally, it was that quick. She just couldn't breathe. Like, she was really struggling for breath. At first, she rang 111, then she went, no, I'm not doing that. She rang 999. And the ambulance come, and the ambulance fella said, has she got a problem with her heart? And she didn't. She had no problems, no health problems. My mum was a teetotal non-smoker. You know, she walked everywhere. She never drove. She walked everywhere. And she literally couldn't breathe. And the ambulance driver said, she's got a problem with her heart. And we said, no problems with her heart. You know, she's never been ill. She's only had surgery last year. She had a full blood count done in the February. So all her blood, that was all fine. And he said, don't worry, we'll look after her. And she got taken to hospital. At 1 o'clock, my sister got a phone call to say, oh, she's not well. We're going to put her on CPAP. And
sorry, what does that mean? CPAP?
Oxygen mask. You know,
Okay.
one of them, you know, they actually give them to people. You know, I believe that they give them to people, you know, like when they snore so badly during the night and they literally stop breathing.
Yes.
I'm sure it's a similar thing to that, if I'm honest. And they said that, and they just said, I'm sure they said that they would not resuscitate her. And that was the last phone call we got. They didn't call us back. My daughter rang at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the evening, and they said, we thought, right, no, we're just gonna. They're busy people. We don't want to interfere with them. You know, they're doing a fantastic job. And my daughter phoned at 9 o'clock, and they went, no, she's comfortable, and you won't have no more news until tomorrow afternoon when the doctors have done their rounds. But that was it. She died at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, how awful.
On her own. They tried to say, they refused to say a medical record at first. For what reason, I don't know. And then when I've looked at them, and now I'm not medically trained, but I don't know how you only check on somebody in a high dependency unit every 2 hours. Because if you're checking on somebody every half an hour, every hour, you need to monitor that and put that down on the paperwork. There's nothing. It's quite scary how there's actually hardly any notes on my mum, if I'm honest.
How often were they monitoring her, or you just don't know?
Every 2 hours. Now, when she was down in A&E, they were checking her every half an hour. And when they said to my sister that they wouldn't resuscitate her, I phoned up and I said, you can't do that. That's against the law. And they said, oh, she's quite ill. And I said, yeah, but my mum's a fighter. She won't give in. She is a fighter. She won't give in. And that's the last phone call. I gave them my number. I never even got a phone call. So it's quite frustrating when you see people say, oh, they allowed us in for the last hour, or we got a video call, or even a phone call. Nothing. And when they said to my sister at 5 o'clock in the morning, somebody can come up, she's got a couple of hours left. And my sister said, okay, I'm coming. She actually phoned me and she said, look, we've got the option. And I said, no, you go now. And so she said, right, I'm coming. And she phoned the hospital back and said, I'm on my way. This was within minutes. And the nurse said to her, she said, oh, hang on a minute, let me go and check. And she said, oh, I'm so sorry, she's already gone. How can you go from, she's got a couple of hours left, to within minutes, she's gone?
How awful.
I truly believe, when I've looked at my mum's medical records, that my mum had already passed when they'd phoned us. And because they weren't doing the checks that they should have done, they didn't actually realise that my mum had actually passed until she'd already gone. So then they phoned my sister. Like, my sister pleaded with them, please, 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 you know, like, give her more oxygen. And they went, oh no, I'm sorry. Like, my sister was on the phone to her the whole time. She walked over, she went, I'm so sorry, she's gone. How can you go? Oh, she's got a couple of hours left. I truly believe they thought we would be, no, it's okay, we're not coming up, or I don't know. I don't know what was going on in their head, that they thought we didn't want to be with our mum. And yet, how can you go from a couple of hours to, oh, I'm sorry, it's minutes, to, oh, sorry, she's already dead? And so it's really, when you see on the news and they go, oh, we were allowed to speak to them before they passed, and we had a video call. We had nothing. The last time I saw my mum was Wednesday morning, being put into an ambulance. And nothing. And I truly believed, I really wanted to believe, and it sounds crazy, that my mum hadn't gone. I don't feel, sometimes I actually forget, even though I've got her ashes here, and I just think she's on holiday, or she's going to come back soon, you know, because obviously she wouldn't take her phone with her when she was cruising with my sister. And my friend actually done my mum's funeral, and for 2.5 weeks I truly believed that my mum hadn't gone, because we've not been able to say goodbye. And it's the pain of her dying on her own. I know how frightened she was, that we weren't there to protect her. It's just that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life. That my mum, her ultimate fear of dying alone, and she died on her own. They tried to say a nurse was with her. How can a nurse be with her and say she's got a couple of hours and she's already gone? And then the notes don't say that anybody was with her, you know, they don't tally up. There's so many errors on there. It's just, that's just, this is the worst thing. The pain that my family's got to go through is knowing how lovely our mum was. We knew what her thoughts were. I don't think she had any final wishes. She never spoke to none of us, not one of us. From that morning when she left, nothing.
What do you want to happen now, Michelle?
I want justice for my mum. Somebody needs to explain what happened. Why you hear on the news of all these, and I think it's fantastic, you know, that you've got some families out there that are getting all that treatment. My mum had 19 hours. 19 hours. They didn't give her a chance. On one of the pieces of paper, it says if her ABG doesn't improve, palliative care. Not once were we told that my mum was dying. We wasn't told she was dying. You know, we weren't in a conversation of, I'm really sorry, but we don't think your mum's going to last the night. We made a phone call that evening. How can, if you're all working in them hospitals and you know how them patients are, how can you say you're not going to get nothing more until 2:00 the next day? How can it be 2:00 the next day And then you've got, they put palliative care on my mum's notes. They actually put a DNR on my mum without us knowing. We wouldn't have accepted that. My mum would not have signed that. I actually got told that my mum signed that for 2.5 weeks. No, there's a signature on here. There's definitely a signature on here.
Is her signature there?
No, there's no signature. And I said to the medical examiner, I said, there is no way my mum has signed that. I know my mum's signature. I know my mum's signature. My mum's signature will not be on there. And he said, oh, I can tell you, Mrs. Rumble, that there is a signature on here. I don't know what your mother's signature is, but there is a signature on here. Well, I'm terribly sorry, but my mum's signature isn't on there. I knew it wouldn't be on there. She would have never. She wanted to live. Obviously, nobody lives forever, but my mum had so much more. My mum could have lived easily for another 20 years. You know, this is a woman here that doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, walked everywhere in her life, you know. The only hiccup she had was having to have a hip replaced. But for a woman that had her hip replaced, done all her physio and everything else, and was still coming to me every Saturday, would get on that bus and come to me every Saturday. I didn't pick her up. She didn't come down in a cab. She got her bus down and walked to me every Saturday. This is not an ill woman, but she's gone into, I just truly believe, I don't understand, how can they pick and choose who they choose to look after? You only hear on the news this morning, 100 days in hospital, kidney dialysis, these injections, them injections, this, that and the other. Nothing. I want justice for my mum. I don't know how you can decide who gets the right to play God.
Which hospital was it, Michelle?
Northwick Park.
Okay. Could I ask you what happened after your mum passed?
There was a funeral 4 weeks after my mum passed. Yeah, we did have a funeral. It's a small funeral, just her children and her grandchildren.
And how did that work? Was it socially distanced? You know?
Socially distanced, yeah. Obviously, we had to travel because we went to a crematorium that actually seated 150 people. We had 19 people there. So obviously there was my family. You didn't need to social distance that much because obviously my family that was there, we could all stand together because we all lived together. So then you have my sisters that all lived together or could stand together. So there wasn't much social distancing. The only social distancing was my auntie and uncle that stood at the back. And then my other uncle, who was her older brother, obviously he couldn't attend because obviously his age. So he couldn't go to his own sister's funeral.
That wasn't the funeral that you had envisaged for your mother?
No, not the flowers, not anything. No, we done the best that we could for how we could do it for her, but it wasn't great. And yeah, the hospital lost my mum's gold chain. Actually, at one point, I don't even think they remembered where she was.
How do you mean?
Well, when she died, and on the Thursday, and then obviously it was the Easter weekend, so everything was pretty much shut, even with this. And so it was on the Monday that we started making phone calls, and we queried because they said my mum had COVID lungs, but the tests that they done on her actually come back negative. And so we queried that, and we did query it for weeks because I said, do another test. No, we're not doing another test. It's definitely COVID lungs. I've actually got the CD of the X-rays that they don't look great. I'm gonna be honest. No, they don't look great. But I did say they chose not to do another test. When my mum died, I believe that she was in the hospital mortuary. When we phoned up and asked, I then got told that she was in some pop-up mortuary in Wembley. Then obviously where the discussions were going backwards and forwards with the death certificate, then she'd been moved again to another pop-up mortuary. And it was only in the final couple of days of when they actually released her body to the funeral directors, that she was actually brought back to the hospital, because I think at that point they were going to do another test, and then they decided against that. I don't know why. Yeah, I don't.
What sort of test?
Wasn't another COVID test
after she'd passed?
Yeah, but to my knowledge, I don't. To my knowledge, they didn't do one. On her paperwork that we've got, it said that she'd actually had the test. Obviously, the result hadn't come back until after she had died.
And the test result?
Was negative.
It was negative. That doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
No. So I did. I asked and I asked and I asked. And then when we got my mum's paperwork, there's a bereavement booklet of how many times you've spoke to the bereavement office. Well, if I say to you that I could have easily spoken to them 50 times, easily, I'd logged every phone call, every person I'd spoke to, yet we were given a bereavement booklet with not even a date on it. It's empty. It's empty. There's not even a dot on the paperwork to say that they'd actually spoken to us. Nothing.
What was the purpose of giving it to you?
I honestly, we are actually still waiting for a meeting with the hospital, whether it's done through Zoom or socially distancing I don't know. I honestly don't know, but we are still waiting. Yeah, we haven't heard anything back yet. Okay. At first, when they sent my mum's medical files, they'd sent it all apart from her observations that they do on her throughout the day and night. They were missing. And so I phoned up and I queried that again, and he went, "Oh, I'm so sorry, we've left them out." They then got sent separately. Now, for a hospital that has been dealing with a family as often as what they dealt with us, they then sent my mum's medical files out to my sister with a different surname. I don't know how you could get her name wrong when my sister was actually in correspondence with the chief executive. At one point, she'd actually gone into a telephone meeting. There was the chief executive, the medical examiner, my sister. They knew who my sister was. They knew her full name. Yet, how can you put a wrong name on somebody's medical notes? And luckily enough, they actually got delivered to the right address, but it's the wrong name on there.
Can I ask you what keeps you awake at night?
Knowing that she died on her own, that she was on her own, and that I feel so guilty now sending her to a hospital that just allowed her to die. There's so much that if I could turn the clock back, I would change so many things. I would have sat with my mum, and I would have cared if I'd have got COVID, but for her not to have died on her own, I don't understand why they kept her if they knew she was dying. They knew she lived with my other sister. So there was a chance that my other sister would have had it. The people in that house would have had it. My mum lived with two of my sisters. So why keep somebody in a hospital and allow her to die in pain and not let her be with her family? This is what goes over and over in my head, that if I could turn the clock back, we would have just sat there with our mum. You know, if I'd have thought that they weren't going to save her, I would have kept her at home. And that they can't take that. We've had nothing yet, so nobody can tell me. I've seen the notes. She was on her own, and that I won't get that vision out of my head. Like, was my mum struggling to breathe? Were they just? Well, I know they were taking no notice. I do know for a fact they were taking no notice, purely for the fact is, 2.5 weeks down the line, my sister got a phone call to say, "Would you like to come and collect the jewellery?" And she said, "Well, where do I come and collect this jewellery from?" Now, you've got to remember, my mum died in the peak of this pandemic. And she said, "Oh, you can just come to the ward." hang on, you wouldn't let us be with our mum? No phone call, no video call, nobody on that Wednesday evening said, she's struggling, would you like to come up? Oh, but hang on, we've got the jewellery. And my sister was just, so then I phoned them back and I said, what do you mean you've got my mum's jewellery? How do we come to a ward that you wouldn't allow us to come to? It's a COVID hospital, basically. You've had so many deaths, but then all of a sudden we're allowed to just walk through the corridors now, are we? I said, where's all my mum's jewellery then? And she said, a couple of the nurses were sorting it out last night. How have you got time to sort out people's belongings when you're meant to be looking after patients? But when I've got my mum's medical notes, clearly they were too busy sorting out people's belongings and not actually looking after the patients, because they clearly didn't look after my mum. It's just, oh, yeah.
How do you think the government has handled the pandemic?
I don't think they've handled it at all. At all. We didn't lock down quick enough. I truly believe that this was over here a lot longer, you know. How can Cambridge University do a case study that COVID lungs look like pneumonia lungs back in November 2019? You know, they knew that was here, you know. They didn't protect their vulnerable at all. They didn't protect my mum. Nothing was put in place, you know. And this unlock, I'm sorry, are they just trying to kill off even more people? They haven't done enough. They haven't in any shape or form whatsoever. They haven't.
What's the one thing you wish that people understood?
I don't think anybody understands how, like, my niece, she lost her mum, and I said, I never felt so much pain in all my life. Like, I lost my dad. We lost our dad 19 years ago to pneumonia. And I don't get us wrong, I loved my dad and I loved him with all my heart as well. But losing my mum and losing my mum to this, where us as a family couldn't spend time together, we couldn't give her the send-off that we wanted, we couldn't be with her. It's just made everything 100 times worse. And it's made me feel 100 times worse that when I grieved my dad, I was with my dad when he died. You know, I still try and think now, is my mum somewhere in a hospital? I know this sounds really silly, but is my mum still out there somewhere? I don't know. I never got to say goodbye. I never saw her. I never saw her in her coffin. I don't know. That's what plays in my mind. I know that sounds stupid, but it's I don't know.
What's the most important message you want to share with the world?
This should never have got out. There should have been more things put in place. I don't know. You've got some countries out there that shut down straight away that have had hardly any deaths. How is we as a country here? I know we need an economy and I know we need this, but so did them other countries, and they took that chance and they shut down. They didn't have so many deaths. Why is there still so many deaths? And it's not got less. There were still 155 deaths recorded yesterday. That's not one, that's not two, that's 155 deaths. It's not good enough. In this day and age, how can this be in this day and age? How can this world, with the technology that we've got, how has this happened? How?
Thank you for sharing that with us. I know that was painful.
It's every day. I go to sleep crying, and if I fall asleep, which is not for long, I wake up the guilt of letting my mum go in that ambulance on her own. That'll haunt me for the rest of my life. I just wish they treated everybody the same. I just wish everybody got the same treatment. And some families out there have been treated fantastically, and that's great, and that is great. And some families have been in hospital for days and days and days and days and actually come out the other side, and that's fantastic, and that is fantastic. But I just think they should have treated everybody the same. Why have you built all these hospitals and they've not been used to their full capacity? You know, the Nightingale Hospital, that didn't get used to its full capacity. You know, they've picked and choose who they wanted to help, and they've killed off literally a whole generation. You can clearly see that on that memorial site. They have clearly killed off a whole generation. I find it shocking. My mum shouldn't have died. She shouldn't have died. But it's not fair how she died either. She should have been with us. And we wasn't given that opportunity. But 2.5 weeks later, we can go to that same hospital that have got COVID people on that ward. How does that make sense?